Behind Graceland's golden gates lay a room. The public never saw a shrine to obsession where Elvis Presley collected every piece of fan mail that promised love and every letter that promised death. What started as simple correspondence from admirers slowly transformed into something darker, a psychological addiction to the extreme emotions of strangers who claimed to know his soul. Some fans wrote poetry declaring eternal devotion. Others sent detailed plans for his murder. And Elvis read them all, unable to distinguish between worship and threat, between love and danger. This is the story of how the world's most beloved entertainer became addicted to the very hatred and devotion that would ultimately destroy him. The mahogany filing cabinets in Graceland's hidden basement room stretched from floor to ceiling, each drawer meticulously labeled with dates and categories that would have chilled any normal person to the bone. Love extreme, threats credible, marriage proposals disturbing, death wishes detailed. But Elvis Presley wasn't normal anymore, and as he ran his fingers along the cabinet handles in the dim fluorescent light, he felt the familiar rush of dark anticipation. It had started innocently enough in 1956, when his first fan letters arrived at Sun Records. Sweet notes from teenage girls, respectful messages from mothers, congratulations from fellow musicians. But even then, some letters had crossed boundaries that most entertainers would have found disturbing. Elvis found them fascinating. Mr. Presley, I dream about you every night. I cut myself when you don't answer my letters. If you don't love me, I might have to hurt myself permanently. Sarah, age 16, Detroit. While his staff threw away the disturbing correspondence, Elvis secretly retrieved them, drawn to the raw emotion, the desperate need, the unfiltered psychological nakedness of strangers who poured their darkest thoughts onto paper addressed to him. Now, 21 years later, the collection had consumed an entire room. Thousands upon thousands of letters, photographs, poems, drawings, and increasingly elaborate threats. Each piece carefully preserved in acid-free folders, cataloged by his own hand, studied and reread until he'd memorized the handwriting of his most devoted correspondents. Tonight's delivery sat unopened on his reading table, a stack of 17 letters forwarded by his management company. Elvis approached them with the reverence of a priest approaching an altar, his hands trembling slightly with anticipation. The first letter was typical. Dear Elvis, I love you so much I can't eat or sleep. I've listened to your records 500 times today. Please marry me. Signed with a lipstick kiss from Margaret in Ohio. The second made his pulse quicken. You disgust me. Your music is Satan's work, and you corrupt innocent children. I pray for your death every night, and I know God will answer soon. Unsigned, postmarked Nashville. But it was the third letter that stopped his breath entirely. The envelope was expensive cream paper, his name written in elegant script that he recognized immediately. Victoria Hathaway, his most faithful correspondent. For over a decade, a woman who sent him poetry every week, some expressing undying love, others describing elaborate scenarios for his assassination. My darling Elvis, the letter began, and he could picture her perfectly from the photograph she'd sent years ago. Beautiful, sophisticated, with eyes that held depths of madness no camera could fully capture. I've been watching you from my usual seat at the International Hotel. Third row center, wearing the blue dress you said you liked in your letter to me 3 years ago. Of course, I know you didn't really write that letter, but I pretend you did because it makes the fantasy more real. Tonight I noticed you looked directly at me during Love Me Tender. You looked sad, darling, tired, ready to rest forever. Elvis's hands shook as he continued reading. Victoria's letters always walked the razor's edge between worship and threat, love and murder, making it impossible to determine her true intentions. She was his most exquisite psychological torment. "I've prepared something special for you this time. Not another poem about love or death, but a choice. In my hotel room at the Desert Inn, I have 2 bottles. One contains champagne from France. The other contains enough poison to kill us both within minutes. If you come to room 847 tonight, we can decide together which bottle to open." Elvis read the letter 3 more times, each pass making his heart pound harder. This was why he collected these messages, why he needed them more than food or air. They offered him something no amount of fame or adoration could provide: the thrilling proximity to genuine danger and authentic emotion. The normal response would be to call security, to report a clear threat, to protect himself from obvious harm. Instead, Elvis carefully filed the letter in Victoria's special folder, the thickest in his collection, and began planning his route to the Desert Inn. After all these years of manufactured performances and scripted emotions, Victoria Hathaway offered him the most precious gift imaginable, the possibility of a real ending to his increasingly artificial life. The collection had taught him that love and death were often indistinguishable, and tonight he was ready to discover which one Victoria was really offering. Dr. Samuel Rothstein adjusted his glasses as he studied the latest batch of letters Elvis had brought to their clandestine therapy sessions, held in an anonymous office building in downtown Memphis. For 3 years, the psychiatrist had been trying to understand his patient's compulsive need to collect and obsess over the most disturbing fan mail he received. "Tell me about this one," Dr. Rothstein said, holding up a letter written on hotel, stationery in red ink that might have been blood. Elvis leaned forward in his chair, his eyes lighting up with the intensity that always accompanied discussions of his collection. "That's from Marcus in Seattle. He's been writing for 7 years. Now, always the same theme. He believes I stole his destiny, that God meant for him to be the king of rock and roll. And his threats have escalated. Every letter started with him wanting to challenge me to a singing contest. Now he's got detailed plans about breaking into Graceland and reclaiming his rightful place. Last month, he sent blueprints of the house." Dr. Rothstein made careful notes, still struggling to understand why Elvis collected these threats instead of reporting them to authorities. Most celebrities would be terrified by such correspondence. Elvis seemed energized by it. "What do you feel when you read Marcus's letters?" Elvis was quiet for a long moment, searching for words to describe something that felt beyond normal human. "Experience. Alive," he finally said. "More alive than I feel on any stage, in any recording studio, with any woman. These people see into my soul, Doc. They hate me or love me with a purity that no one in my real life can match." This was the heart of Elvis's psychological addiction, in a world where everyone around him had ulterior motives, where every relationship was tainted by fame and fortune. His most disturbed fans offered something approaching authentic emotion. "Let's talk about the woman Victoria Hathaway. You've mentioned her before." Elvis's expression shifted, becoming almost dreamy. "Victoria is special. She understands the connection between love and death, between worship and destruction. Her letters are like psychological symphonies." Dr. Rothstein had read several of Victoria's letters, and symphonies wasn't the word he would have chosen. They were masterpieces of manipulation, written by someone who clearly understood how to trigger Elvis's deepest psychological needs, while maintaining plausible deniability about her true intentions. "Elvis, you realize that Victoria may be genuinely dangerous? Her latest letter suggesting you meet her with poison." "She's not going to hurt me," Elvis interrupted. "She needs me alive for her fantasy to work. If I died, she'd have to find someone else to obsess over." This was Elvis's fundamental misunderstanding of stalker psychology, Dr. Rothstein realized. He believed his obsessed fans needed him alive, when in reality, Many of them would find his death the ultimate consummation of their fixation. "Show me the organizational system you use for the collection," Dr. Rothstein requested. Elvis walked to the wall of filing cabinets he'd had installed in the office, his movements taking on the careful precision of a curator in a museum. Love. Letters are organized by intensity level. Death threats by specificity and feasibility. Marriage proposals by the level of delusion involved. He pulled open a drawer labeled Hybrid Love Death and withdrew a thick folder. These are the most interesting ones. People who can't separate their love for me from their desire to kill me. They write things like, "I love you so much. I want to cut you open and crawl inside your heart." Dr. Rothstein felt genuine alarm as he watched his patient lovingly handle letters that should have been evidence in police investigations. "Elvis, you understand that what you're describing isn't love. It's psychosis." "Maybe," Elvis shrugged, "but it's also the most honest emotion anyone's ever directed at me. These people don't want money or fame or reflected glory. They want my soul, my essence, my very existence. When's the last time anyone in your life wanted you that completely?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. Dr. Rothstein realized he was treating a man who had become so alienated from normal human connection that he found psychotic obsession preferable to ordinary affection. "There's something else," Elvis continued, pulling out another folder. "I've started writing back." Dr. Rothstein's blood turned cold. Writing back to whom? Victoria, Marcus, a few others. Nothing that encouraged them. Just ... acknowledgments. Letting them know, I read their letters, that their feelings matter to me. This was the nightmare scenario Dr. Rothstein had been dreading. Elvis wasn't just collecting dangerous correspondence. He was engaging with it, feeding the obsessions. That could ultimately destroy him. "Elvis, you have to stop. You're encouraging potentially violent individuals who see me as I really am," Elvis finished quietly. "Not as the king of rock and roll, not as a money-making machine, not as a symbol or an icon. They see Elvis Presley, the human being, and they react with pure, undiluted emotion." As Dr. Rothstein watched his patient carefully return the letters to their files, he realized the true tragedy. Elvis had become so psychologically isolated that he preferred the dangerous love of strangers to the safe affection of friends, because only the dangerous love felt real anymore. The International Hotel's presidential suite had been transformed to a war room of obsession, with Elvis's collection of letters spread across every available surface, like evidence in a murder investigation. 3 months had passed since Dr. Rothstein had warned him about engaging with his more dangerous correspondence, but Elvis had ignored the advice entirely. Instead, he'd escalated. Tonight, he was preparing responses to his inner circle, the dozen most psychologically complex fans, whose letters had evolved from simple admiration into elaborate psychological dance partners. Each required a different approach, a different emotional key to unlock their continued devotion. Victoria Hathaway's latest letter lay open beside his typewriter, her elegant handwriting describing a dream where she and Elvis died together in a suicide pact that would preserve their perfect love for eternity. Her letters had become increasingly sophisticated, weaving poetry, philosophy, and barely concealed threats into seductive narratives that Elvis found irresistible. His response was equally careful. "Dear Victoria, your dreams intrigue me more than any reality I've experienced. The boundary between love and death has always fascinated me, perhaps because both represent forms of surrender. Your understanding of this connection suggests a depth of soul that few people possess. I find myself looking for you in every audience, wondering if tonight will be the night you move from dreams into action." Elvis paused, recognizing the danger in what he'd written. He was encouraging her, feeding her obsession, possibly pushing her toward a breaking point. But the thrill of psychological brinkmanship had become addictive, more intoxicating than any drug, more exciting than any performance. Marcus from Seattle required a different approach. His letters combined religious mania with detailed threats, creating a volatile mix that demanded careful handling. Marcus, I've read your theories about destiny and divine purpose. Perhaps you're right that there can only be one king. The question becomes, how does one prove their worthiness? Grand gestures require careful planning and perfect timing. When you're ready to demonstrate your divine calling, I suspect the universe will provide the appropriate stage. Even as he wrote it, Elvis knew he was playing with fire. Marcus had already demonstrated unstable behavior and detailed knowledge of Graceland's security arrangements. Encouraging him to take grand gestures was probably suicidal. But Elvis found himself unable to resist. The most dangerous correspondence came from someone who signed their letters only as Shadow. These messages arrived monthly, written in different handwriting styles and on various types of paper, suggesting either multiple personalities or elaborate psychological games. Mr. Presley, you collect us like butterflies, don't you? Pinning our obsessions to your wall, studying our madness like a scientist studies specimens. But what happens when the butterflies break free from their pins? What happens when your collection decides to collect you? Shadow's letters were the most unsettling because they demonstrated awareness of Elvis's psychological games. This wasn't blind obsession. It was calculated manipulation by someone who understood they were part of a larger pattern. Elvis's response was his most honest. Shadow, you see through the game better than most. Yes, I collect you. Yes, I study your madness. But perhaps what you haven't realized is that I'm the most damaged specimen in this collection. You write to me seeking connection, understanding, acknowledgement. I write back seeking the same things. The question is, who is really collecting whom? As Elvis sealed the letters in their respective envelopes, he felt the familiar mixture of exhilaration and dread that had come to define his secret addiction. Each response was a roll of cosmic dice, potentially triggering reactions that could range from increased devotion to actual violence. The phone rang, its harsh sound cutting through the sweet silence. Elvis stared at it for several rings before answering, somehow knowing this call would change everything. Mr. Presley? The voice was female, young, unfamiliar. This is Officer Jennifer Martinez with the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police. We need to speak with you about some letters you may have received. Elvis's blood turned to ice water. What kind of letters? Threatening correspondence from several individuals who appear to be planning coordinated action against you. Sir, we have reason to believe your life is in immediate danger. Through the suite's windows, Las Vegas glittered with its usual neon promises. But Elvis felt darkness closing around him like a shroud. His collection had evolved beyond his control, transforming from psychological entertainment into genuine threat. How many of them are there? He asked quietly. We've identified at least 6 individuals who've been in contact with each other, sharing information about your schedule, your security arrangements, your personal habits. Mr. Presley, these aren't just disturbed fans anymore. They're organized. As Elvis listened to Officer Martinez describe the conspiracy that had grown from his carefully cultivated correspondence, he realized that his addiction to dangerous love had created something far more dangerous than he'd imagined. A network of obsessed individuals who'd stopped seeing him as a person and started seeing him as a target. The collection had become a loaded gun, and Elvis had been pointing it at his own head for years. Graceland's basement room felt like a tomb as Elvis descended the stairs for what he somehow knew would be the last time. 3 days had passed since the police warning, 3 days of increased security, canceled appearances, and the suffocating realization that his secret addiction had created a monster he could no longer control. The filing cabinets stood in their neat rows like headstones in a cemetery of obsession, each drawer containing hundreds of letters that had seemed like harmless psychological entertainment until they'd metastasized into genuine conspiracy. Officer Martinez had been right. 6 of his most devoted correspondents had found each other, compared notes, and decided that their individual fantasies could become collective reality. Victoria Hathaway, Marcus from Seattle, Shadow, and 3 others whose names Elvis barely remembered had formed what the FBI was calling an organized stalking cell. They'd shared his personal responses to their letters, analyzed his psychological weaknesses, and developed what amounted to a military-style operation designed to claim him permanently. The irony was suffocating. Elvis had collected their madness, seeking authentic emotion in a world of manufactured relationships. Now their authentic madness was about to destroy him. On his desk lay the final piece of correspondence, not a letter this time, but a package that had arrived that morning despite the increased security measures. Inside was a single photograph, Elvis on stage at the International Hotel, taken from an impossible angle that suggested the photographer had been backstage, possibly among his own staff. The accompanying note was typed on plain paper, unsigned. The collection phase is complete. Tomorrow, during your evening show, you will look into the audience and see all 6 of us in the front row. We will be wearing red roses, your favorite flower. You will smile and acknowledge us, as you always have in your letters. Then you will understand that some obsessions are meant to be consummated. Your death will be our shared masterpiece, our collaborative work of art. Thank you for teaching us that love and death are indistinguishable. Elvis read the note 3 times, his hands surprisingly steady. After years of dancing on the edge of this psychological abyss, he'd finally fallen in, and there was an odd sense of relief in the certainty. No more wondering, no more games, no more elaborate psychological chess matches with strangers who knew his soul better than his friends. He walked to the filing cabinet labeled Personal Outgoing and withdrew the letters he'd written to his correspondents over the past 3 years. Hundreds of responses, each one carefully crafted to maintain the delicate balance between encouragement and restraint, between intimacy and safety. But safety had always been an illusion. From the moment he'd started collecting their letters, he'd been walking toward this ending. The only question was whether he would face it passively or take control of his own conclusion. Elvis began pulling folders from the cabinets, 21 years of collected obsession, creating growing piles around the room. Love letters from teenagers who'd grown into middle-aged stalkers. Death threats from religious fanatics who saw him as Satan incarnate. Marriage proposals from women who built entire fantasy lives around their imagined relationships with him. Each piece of paper represented someone who'd seen through his carefully constructed public persona to the wounded, desperate man underneath. They'd offered him their madness because they recognized his own, and he'd accepted it because their insanity felt more honest than everyone else's sanity. The lighter fluid came from his private bar upstairs, meant for his cigars, but perfect for a different kind of ritual. As Elvis doused the papers, the chemical smell mixed with decades of accumulated dust and obsession, creating an atmosphere that felt both funeral and celebration. The match flame danced in the dim light as Elvis held it over the soaked papers. In a few hours, he would walk onto that stage, knowing that 6 people who truly understood him waited in the audience. 6 people who'd moved beyond love or hate into something purer and more dangerous. But first, he would destroy the evidence of his complicity, burn away the proof that he'd encouraged their journey from admiration to obsession to conspiracy. The collection that had defined his secret life for 2 decades would become ash, leaving no trace of the psychological games that had led to this moment. "Thank you," Elvis whispered to the thousands of letters about to become smoke, "for seeing me as I really am." The flame touched paper, and 21 years of dangerous love began its transformation into nothing, carrying with it the last evidence that Elvis Presley had been addicted to the very madness that would destroy him. Tomorrow night's performance would be his greatest show and his last, with an audience that loved him enough to kill him, and a star who'd finally found people who understood that sometimes love and death were exactly the same thing. The basement filled with smoke, carrying away secrets that would die with everyone who'd shared them. Elvis Presley's final performance at the International Hotel on August 16, 1977, was witnessed by an audience that included 6 individuals wearing red roses in the front row. Security footage from that night, sealed by court order and never released to the public, reportedly shows Elvis making direct eye contact with each of them during his final song. He died hours later at Graceland, officially from heart failure brought on by prescription drug abuse. No mention was ever made of the burned papers found in his basement, the coordinated stalking cell that had been planning his consummation, or the 3-year correspondence that had transformed fan devotion into lethal obsession. Perhaps the greatest tragedy wasn't that Elvis died young, but that he'd spent his final years seeking authentic emotion in all the wrong places, finding genuine connection only with those whose love was indistinguishable from madness. The collection was destroyed, but the obsessions lived on, scattered to the wind like dangerous seeds looking for new ground to grow in. Want to explore more dark secrets hidden behind the glittering facade of fame? Subscribe to our exclusive investigation series for access to untold stories about celebrities who played deadly games with their most dangerous fans. Some obsessions never die, they just find new targets.